The Russian-Ukrainian conflict has had significant political impacts on the world. It has strained relations between Russia and many Western countries, leading to economic sanctions and diplomatic tensions. The conflict has challenged the post-Cold War order in Europe and raised questions about the ability of international law to prevent aggression. To understand the political impact of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, it is important to examine the context in which it occurred. In 2014, Ukraine experienced a political crisis that resulted in the ousting of its pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych. Yanukovych's ouster was the culmination of months of protests by Ukrainians who sought closer ties with the European Union, EU, and greater democratic freedoms. Russia opposed Yanukovych's ouster, seeing it as a Western-backed coup aimed at undermining Russian influence in the region. In response, Russia annexed Crimea, a region of Ukraine with a majority ethnic Russian population. It also supported separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine who sought to break away from Ukraine and establish independent republics. The conflict in Ukraine has since become a proxy war between Russia and the West, with Western countries supporting Ukraine and Russia supporting the separatists. This has led to a significant deterioration in relations between Russia and the West, with many Western countries imposing economic sanctions on Russia in response to its actions in Ukraine. The conflict has also challenged the post-Cold War order in Europe. Since the end of the Cold War, there has been a consensus in Europe that countries should respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia's annexation of Crimea and its support for separatists in eastern Ukraine have violated this principle, calling into question the stability of the European security architecture. The conflict has also raised questions about the ability of international law to prevent aggression. Russia's actions in Ukraine have violated international law, including the UN Charter and the Helsinki Final Act, which Russia signed in 1975. However, the international community has been unable to effectively respond to Russia's actions, raising questions about the efficacy of international law in preventing aggression. The conflict has also had significant implications for the NATO alliance. NATO was formed in 1949 as a military alliance to counter the Soviet Union. Since the end of the Cold War, NATO has expanded eastward, incorporating many former Soviet bloc countries. This has been a point of contention for Russia, which sees NATO expansion as a threat to its security. The conflict in Ukraine has further strained relations between NATO and Russia, with NATO countries increasing their military presence in Eastern Europe in response to Russian aggression. This has led to concerns about a potential military confrontation between NATO and Russia, raising questions about the stability of the European security architecture. In conclusion, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict has had significant political impacts on the world. It has strained relations between Russia and many Western countries, challenging the post-Cold War order in Europe and raising questions about the ability of international law to prevent aggression. The conflict has also had significant implications for the NATO alliance, raising concerns about the stability of the European security architecture. The Russian-Ukrainian conflict has had significant economic impacts on the world. The conflict has had a negative impact on the Ukrainian economy, which has struggled with high inflation and a decrease in trade. It has also led to decreased economic ties between Russia and the West, which has hurt the Russian economy as well. To understand the economic impact of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, it is important to examine the economic context in which it occurred. Ukraine has historically been an important agricultural and industrial country, with a significant portion of its exports going to Russia. However, since the ouster of Yanukovych in 2014, the Ukrainian economy has been in a state of crisis. The conflict in eastern Ukraine has disrupted economic activity in the region, leading to a decrease in trade and investment. Many businesses have been forced to shut down, and the conflict has led to a significant decrease in the value of the Ukrainian currency, the hryvnia. This has led to high inflation, making it more difficult for ordinary Ukrainians to afford basic necessities such as food and housing. The conflict has also had a negative impact on Russia's economy. In response to Russia's actions in Ukraine, many Western countries have imposed economic sanctions on Russia. These sanctions have targeted Russia's energy, finance, and defense sectors, making it more difficult for Russian businesses to access international markets and finance. The sanctions have had a significant impact on Russia's economy, which has struggled with low oil prices and high inflation. The Russian economy has been in a state of recession since 2014, and the sanctions have made it more difficult for the government to stimulate economic growth. The conflict has also led to decreased economic ties between Russia and the West. Prior to the conflict, Russia was a significant trading partner for many Western countries, particularly in Europe. However, since the imposition of sanctions, many Western countries have reduced their trade with Russia, leading to a decrease in economic activity and a reduction in trade volumes. The conflict has also had implications for energy markets. Ukraine is an important transit country for Russian gas exports to Europe, and the conflict has disrupted energy supplies in Europe. In 2014, Russia cut off gas supplies to Ukraine, leading to concerns about energy security. The Russian-Ukrainian conflict has had a significant impact on energy markets, particularly with regards to natural gas exports from Russia to Europe. Ukraine serves as a critical transit country for Russian gas exports to Europe, making up approximately 40% of Europe's gas imports from Russia. The conflict has led to disruptions in the supply of gas to Europe, which has raised concerns about energy security and led to calls for diversification of Europe's energy sources. The conflict in Ukraine has led to several disruptions in the supply of gas to Europe. In 2014, Russia cut off gas supplies to Ukraine in a dispute over pricing and outstanding debts. This led to concerns that gas supplies to Europe would also be disrupted, as Ukraine is a critical transit country for Russian gas exports. In response, the European Union, EU, and Ukraine signed an agreement to ensure that gas supplies to Europe would not be disrupted. However, there have been several instances since then where the supply of gas to Europe has been disrupted, including in 2015 and 2018. The disruptions in the supply of gas to Europe have raised concerns about energy security. Europe is heavily dependent on Russian gas exports, and any disruption in the supply of gas could have significant economic and political consequences. The disruptions have also highlighted the need for Europe to diversify its energy sources and reduce its dependence on Russian gas. The conflict has also had implications for the construction of gas pipelines in Europe. In particular, the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would transport gas from Russia to Germany via the Baltic Sea, has been a point of contention. Many countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, have opposed the construction of the pipeline, seeing it as a way for Russia to increase its influence in Europe and bypass Ukraine as a transit country. The US has also opposed the pipeline, seeing it as a threat to European energy security and an attempt by Russia to use gas exports as a geopolitical weapon. The economic impact of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict has been significant, particularly for Ukraine, which has struggled with high inflation and a decrease in trade. The conflict has also led to decreased economic ties between Russia and the West, which has hurt the Russian economy. The conflict has had implications for energy markets, particularly with regards to natural gas exports from Russia to Europe. The disruptions in the supply of gas to Europe have raised concerns about energy security and highlighted the need for Europe to diversify its energy sources. The conflict has also been a point of contention with regards to the construction of gas pipelines in Europe. The Russian-Ukrainian conflict has had significant political implications, both domestically and internationally. The conflict has led to a shift in global power dynamics, with Russia challenging the international order and the West responding with sanctions and increased military presence in Europe. The conflict has also had implications for democratic governance, with both Russia and Ukraine facing challenges to their democratic systems. One of the primary political implications of the conflict has been the challenge to the international order. Russia's actions in Ukraine have challenged the norms and rules of the international system, particularly with regards to territorial integrity and respect for sovereignty. Russia's annexation of Crimea and its support for separatists in eastern Ukraine have been seen as violations of international law, and have led to widespread condemnation from the international community.